Last weekend was the Royal International Air Tattoo. We had great fun meeting you all and seeing some fantastic aircraft. In this month's episode of Flight Deck, we'll take a look at some of our favourites and share some chats we had with pilots and aircrew. The Mirage 2000 is a French single-seat, single-engine, delta-wing, multiple-role fighter capable of all-weather operations. The Mirage 2000 entered service with the HAF in 1988 when 40 aircraft were controversially purchased under the Talos contract. The Hellenic Mirage 2000s are predominantly used as interceptors and against enemy ships as they are compatible with the Exocet missile.
Hello, I'm Richard Rodriguez. I'm with the DFW wing of the Commemorative Air Force. We've been here in the UK since the 30th of April, touring around UK and in France. So this is a DC3 type. It's based on the C-47. The C-47 is a well-known aircraft. I believe here in the UK they call them Dakotas. They're also known as Skytrains. This particular aircraft was assigned to the United States Navy. The Navy used them in their Naval Air Transport Service, so they would have done similar things that the C-47s did in terms of transporting cargo and personnel. The Navy had other plans for this plane though. They used it in their anti-submarine warfare campaign. They fitted the aircraft with state-of-the-art, what was then state-of-the-art, radar and directional radio equipment. Their job was to find and detect German U-boats by picking up radio signals from the U-boats. Once that was accomplished, they would triangulate to those positions, and as they got closer, if the U-boat submerged, they'd be able to track it with the radar equipment that they had. After that, they'd be able to deploy depth bombs to try to sink the U-boat. So this aircraft has been flying since 1944. The Navy had it, as I said, in 1944. It served for a brief time attached to the Naval Attaché in Berlin during the Berlin airlift. The Navy then used it as a test platform for a variety of radar and radio equipment, and they used it for training of that equipment with naval personnel. It served with the Navy until about 1972, at which time it was transferred to the U.S. Forest Service. The U.S. Forest Service used it as a smoke jumper airplane. So if there were wildfires in remote areas, woodland firefighters would be able to climb on board with paratroop gear and then be flown into remote areas to be able to fight fires after they parachuted in. In the early 80s, the Commemorative Air Force purchased the plane. They returned it to its original Navy form, and we've been touring with it since then.
Nicknamed the Mighty Finn, the Panavia Tornado was a joint project between the UK, Italy and Germany, originally known as the multi-role combat aircraft. Designed for low-level strikes, 990 aircraft were built for the partner nations and Saudi Arabia. It came in three main variants: the IDS strike aircraft, the ECR anti-radar version, and the ADV interceptor. Germany received 247 Tornadoes, later adding 112 from the Navy, although only 90 now remain in the fleet due to budget cuts. Despite this, the aircraft remains effective, having served in Kosovo and Afghanistan. Germany plans to retire the Tornado in favour of the F-35A and Typhoon ahead of the future 6th Gen fighter. The Boeing 757, originally developed as a 7N7 to replace the 727, is a twin-engine narrow-body airliner designed for short to medium long-haul routes. First flown in 1982, over 1,000 were built, with the aircraft later approved for intercontinental flights in 1986. The Royal New Zealand Air Force's 40 Squadron operates two 757s for global passenger and freight missions, including government transport. Delivered in 2003, they were upgraded in 2007, with a large cargo door and reinforced floors. As of late 2024, New Zealand has begun seeking a replacement. Whilst at RIAT, we announced a brand new kit, the Supermarine Spitfire Mark 9C Flying Dray, and in case you missed it, here's a close-up look.
There you go. So the Mark 9C Flying Dray, extra parts, beer barrels with P51 nose cones and the bond racks. Also included in the product is a masking set, courtesy of Edward. Every product includes a pint glass, regardless of which retailer you buy it from. And if you pre-order it online with us, you also get a free pin badge. But don't worry, anyone here will also get a free pin badge now, as you see my colleague here. So there you go, guys. Hopefully,
Superb.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Now let's get back to the airshow action, where we have the privilege of talking to Richie Piper, a Catalina co-pilot.
Hello, my name is Richie Piper, one of the Catalina pilots. Mr. Pickup, who's behind me. It's a PBY 5A, and it was commissioned by the United States Navy as a maritime patrol bomber. 3 bids were submitted and Consolidated got the contract. Built just over 3,300, and interestingly, the first 1,800 or so didn't have wheels. They were pure flying boats. As is a maritime aircraft to look for surface shipping, submarines, etc., and downed airmen, it was mainly operating over water. But of course, to land on water, you need 2 things. You need the water itself, and it needs to be quite smooth. Obviously, if the waves are too big, they can't operate. So having the ability to land on land extended their capability. And it was an afterfit, stroke afterthought, so there are some flaws in the undercarriage. It takes about 18 seconds to cycle. And that's why we have a crew chief. So we have 2 pilots and a crew chief. And amongst the duties of the crew chief is to go and check every wheel is either locked down or locked up visually. And they also help with the emergencies in lowering the gear, lowering the floats, or cranking them up by hand. So this airframe was built by Canadian Vickers in 1943. And being a Canadian version, they call it a Canzo, but it is still a Catalina. PBY, patrol bomber, and Y for Consolidated, Mark 5, and the A means it's an amphibian. Built in 43, and it saw service with the Royal Canadian Air Force, particularly on the eastern seaboard as a sub-killer. And obviously the Catalinas helped change the characteristics of the Battle of the Atlantic. Originally, they was very much dropping depth charges, mines, bombs, or torpedoes. We have 2 hard points, 1 under each wing. A lot of them had 4, and you had 500-pound munitions. And so the U-boats used to dive down under the surface, and they were depth charged. As things developed, they put more anti-aircraft guns on the subs and they would fight it out on the surface. This aircraft, there were 2 VC winners when the U-boats was, rather than diving, were fighting it up on the surface, and they were both injured by a combat against U-boats on the surface. John Cruikshank, who's still alive, the oldest VC winner, 105, he was severely injured, but still insisted on commanding the flight. He had 72 injuries, including 10 serious leg wounds, presented with his VC, never flew again, but he likes to come on board, but he will never go into the cockpit. So read up his story, it is an incredible achievement, and the way he looked after his crew. So after that service with the Canadian Air Force, it became a water bomber, not just in Canada, but in South America and France. So when we fly to France, we quite often get free landings as a French historic aircraft. And then it did various different things. Then it was converted into a safari aircraft. So we got larger blisters, and where the rear gun tunnel was is now the air stairs. That never really got going, and then it sat around, and then 23 years ago we bought it to replace our previous aircraft, and we've been operating it ever since. As part of the conversion, they put in the nose gear doors, and that's perhaps the most vulnerable part of the aircraft on the water. A lot of Catalinas that were lost on the water were by a failure of those doors, because although that's enclosed, it's not watertight, so if those go, it's going to flood. So we try and land with the doors out of the water in a level attitude and land on the planing hull. You don't want to flare, put the tail down, because you'll porpoise onto the nose, and you don't want to stove the nose in, so a level attitude is important. That's why those 2 marks, you use which one aligns best for your head height, and you very accurately, perhaps up, sort of ½ centimetre up and down, it's that accurate you need to be. You need to be very accurate in yaw, because it's unstable in yaw. And then you also, unlike a float plane, where you've got 2 floats to level you, we're flying on the hull, and we don't want to dip the floats in the water at high speed. The other thing to note is, if you see where the engines and the props are, prop tips are 17 inches from your head as a pilot. It's good that they're close, so the asymmetry is not a problem. We don't have a lot of control difficulties, but it is very noisy. And on takeoff, the pilots can't hear each other. We have to use hand signs until we're into climb power, and then we can talk. So that's worth noting. If you look down here, you can actually see the step for the planing hull, and that's the bit we want to land and taxi at high speed on. As you can see, it's a parasol wing. We have that pylon with the 4 struts, and you see the little windows. Well, that's where the flight engineer used to sit, and he had his own panel to control the fuel selectors, mixtures, generators, electrical services, and the pilots would actually either ask, or they'd have switches, and rather than turning the service on, it would turn a light in front of the flight engineer, and he'd turn his switch on. Well, we've deleted that, so all the controls are now in the cockpit for the pilots, but those windows, his only real view was actually at the engines to see if they were leaking oil or on fire, etc. So yeah, it was not the best job in the world. If you look at the gear here, this is slightly better for integrity, because it takes a lot of space in the hull, but at least they come up and out of the water, and it's still waterproof. I talked about the crew chief checking the gears up and down. That's one of the windows he checks the uplock on. And on the emergency lowering, there's a little, see the little hatch below the window? He releases the hydraulic uplock, opens that hatch and pushes the wheel over the side. Then there's an action to lock it out. If you notice, no flaps. they would be washed off by the waves as we take off and land. And then at the end here, we have the floats. Now they reduce the stability in yaw because the sail is like another rudder, fixed rudder. Also shortens the wing by 4 foot, from 104 to 100 foot. There's a screw jack that runs in the wing to lift those up and lock them up and lower them down. It's driven by an electric motor, but if that fails, there are 2 holes that the crew chief puts a crank in, the fast hole and the slow hole, and they crank the fast hole as far as they can until it's too difficult. Then they go in the slow hole and finish it off. And it's usually the last bits going up that's the most difficult bit. And then we need a new crew chief because they're absolutely shattered. There are 11 bungs in all the wet part of the aircraft, which we will drain after flying on the water, but importantly make sure are back. And the interesting thing is that we have no water rudder. We do have the air rudder, which you get some control from. The engines being very close together though, we don't get a lot of asymmetric thrust, and particularly if we're taxiing crosswind or downwind. It's quite hard to control on the water, so we have a party trick, and we can lower each one of the undercarriage legs separately. So if we want to go right, we'll lower that one. If we want to go left, we'll lower that one, so it gives us a bit more control. These, as I say, are the Safari blisters. The originals are a bit smaller, and they had sort of like an eyelid arrangement, so you could slide them open, swing out a 30 caliber machine gun, and there was a 20 caliber rear gun tunnel where the air stair was. Notice that big eye there. When you tow the aircraft on the water, it's very unstable going forward, so it's best to tow it backwards and have that drag of the step to keep the aeroplane under control. Originally in the aircraft, you used to get in and out of them via the blisters, both on land and on water, but ours are so big and heavy we don't do that. So we have a bigger hatch on the side, and that's how we get in and out. And the other thing to note is when we come to the mooring on the water, we don't have any brakes, so we have to keep going. And the crew chief will go through a tunnel between the pilot's feet, come out of a hatch in the nose, slide down onto this running board, which often gets his feet wet, and he has to grab the mooring buoy rope tied onto that big sort of stanchion there, and only when he's confirmed he's tied it on do we stop the engines. So he's outside with the engines turning, so we need to manage that very carefully. And until this year we didn't have fuel gauges, so, and we still do it, but the ground crew will go up on top of the wing and dip the tanks, and we use that as a backup to the fuel gauges we've now got permission to fit. So yeah, it's crew of 3, 2 pilots and the crew chief, and the crew chief worked quite hard. We've just got the fun of flying it. It's a very slow aircraft. Cruises about 120 knots, but the tankage, standard tankage, will allow you to fly an 18-hour mission. Now, if you imagine that in the winter in the Atlantic, there's no sound or heat insulation in the aircraft. It's really cold. And you've already heard how noisy it is as well. And this type still has the record for the longest commercial flight. Not by distance, because it's slow, but by time. So when the Japanese invaded Singapore, it effectively cut Australia off. So they stripped some Catalinas down, put extra fuel tankage, and Qantas operated what they called the double sunrise flights from Perth to Pakistan, or what is now Pakistan, Karachi. They would fly overnight over the Japanese territory, but they'd see 2 sunrises because the flights were between 28 and 33 hours. So that's hence double sunrise flights, and I believe they still have that record. Collectively, obviously, you know, the history of the aircraft and the type, you know, it's preserving that and showing it to the public. For me and quite a few of the pilots, radial engines, that you have to handle them slightly differently. They have their own character. But the aircraft itself is very, very heavy. It's all manual controls. And it's, I think aircraft that are a challenge to fly are more enjoyable. We both operated on land and on the water still, generally only fresh water. And you have to be about 4 times more accurate landing on water than you do on land. And I don't know if you can see on the nose up there, there's an antenna, VHF antenna. There's 2 black bits of tape on there. And you have to keep those virtually stationary on the horizon when you're landing on the water. It's that accurate.
First flown in 1977, the Sikorsky S-76 is a medium-sized utility helicopter based on technology from the S-70 Black Hawk. Built with a mix of composite and metal, it was designed for rugged civilian use with potential military applications. Spain's Air and Space Force has operated the upgraded S-76C since 1991. The Airbus helicopter's AS365 Dolphin, a medium twin-engine helicopter known for its enclosed fenestron tail rotor, ideal for confined operations. First flown in 1975 and developed from the original single-engine Dolphin, it was initially marketed as the Dolphin II. The type has set several speed records, including for travel between Paris and London, and is widely used by militaries and government agencies worldwide. The E3 Sentry, commonly known as AWACS, the Airborne Warning and Control System, is based on the Boeing 707-320B and was developed in the 1970s to replace the HC.1. Featuring a distinctive rotating radome, its radar can track targets from sea level to the stratosphere. Between 1977 and 1992, 68 were built for the US Air Force, NATO, France, Saudi Arabia and the RAF. Now before we finish, let's look at something that landed last week, the Boeing Chinook HC.1 late in 1/72nd scale. Also now in stock is the consolidated B-24D Liberator in 1/72nd scale, a fantastic kit made up of 258 parts. The Aviation Photo Awards are back for the 4th year running, and this time we're mixing things up. In addition to our popular over 18 and under 18 categories, we're excited to introduce 2 brand new additions. The Airfix category, where our team will handpick their favourite aviation shop from this year's entry, and the Darren Harbour category, judged exclusively by our special guest judge, Darren Harbour. With the addition of 2 new categories, it means there's now 4 chances to win, and 4 ultimate prizes up for grabs. But that's not all. For the first time, you can cast your vote for your favourite photos and help decide who will be crowned the winner in both the over 18s and under 18s category. That's all we have time for in this month's episode of Flight Deck. If you've enjoyed, please like and subscribe. Nathan, over and out.